So, you've been talking about the, very interesting time that you can set up a solar plant for in as little as 2 weeks, but taking that power which is generated to other parts is a challenge. Now, Prime Minister Modi has talked about a very ambitious solar program, and I think he displayed some of that as the Chief Minister of Gujarat as well. How much time will it take, or how soon can we reach these targets which have been set out for the government and the industry?
So the target right now is 100 gigawatts by 2022. We are at 8,000 megawatts or 8 gigawatts of installed capacity as of September of this year. So there is another 92 gigawatts to go between now and 2022, which is fairly ambitious. Is it impossible? Answer is no. The demand is there. The rationale for doing solar is there. I think a couple of things. One, the center and the state alignment on policy and regulations is very important. Second is the ability of the stakeholders to build the transmission capacity. And so a lot of the transmission capacity is built by the central agencies like Power Grid. And then there is a lot of state-owned transmission capacity which has to come up. Now, if you're aware of it, there is a Green Corridor program which the government has also announced in 2010, which was meant to create a high-capacity transmission backbone from Rajasthan all the way down to Tamil Nadu, which would then evacuate solar and wind from various pockets where you've got good resource and allow them to come on this highway, which then can be off-taken by various consumers. And I think the Green Corridor activity needs to be accelerated. The other issue in terms of building out this capacity would be availability of financing, right? Now, the good news on that front is we see India as one of the fastest growing markets for solar. We also see traditional markets like Europe and China slowing down in terms of its capacity addition. And so we see a lot of capital, equity capital, from large European utility players, all of who've announced that they're not going to build any more thermal capacity as part of the COP21 deliberations, invest that equity into renewables because that's the only natural option left for them to continue growing their revenue base. And we see a lot of that capital come into India. The government, to its credit, has done a fantastic job of creating the solar parks policy, where the government steps in, buys land, builds an infrastructure, and offers a developed site for an investor to come in and start building, right? And oh, by the way, they also have NTPC, who is one of the most bankable companies in India, be the off-taker of that energy.
Correct.
So that helps reduce the cost of capital. It also makes foreign institutional investors, foreign utilities comfortable.
So money is not a challenge.
I would say it's a challenge, but we're seeing the government take steps
to make sure that it's
make foreign investors comfortable to invest in solar by de-risking some of the traditional risks.
So the land, because solar would mostly come up in areas which are arid, dry, and probably there is no agriculture there, because you don't, as you were mentioning, you don't really need to have fertile lands for solar.
Right.
But bringing it and connecting it to the grid is the challenge. So the capacity of Indian agencies to be able to connect solar plants to grid, that speed would be the only challenge, or could be the booster for reaching the target.
Absolutely. I think the ability of the authorities to create those transmission interconnects along with the solar parks is where.
So would this be Power Grid Corporation or local?
Predominantly Power Grid, and some of it is local, but mainly Power Grid, because these are very large capacity substations, 400 kV and above, which is predominantly done by Power Grid.
You manufacture in India?
Right. We don't.
You don't. No. But what about the whole concept of Make in India? How does that fit into your plans?
So Make in India, from our perspective, has done a lot to change the perception of India being a difficult place to do business. It's, I think, clearly created awareness around ease of doing business. And again, this is again an effort where center and states have to be in tandem. We've seen permitting of solar projects in certain states become very simple as they move to electronic approvals. I mean, states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Punjab have
that's ease of doing business.
Yeah,
also.
So the ease of doing business part of it has been addressed by Make in India so far. What we think has still some distance to be covered is the competitiveness of the investment in India, right? And so manufacturing in India has to be for the world and not just for manufacturing in India, only for India, because the domestic market, at least for solar panels, is not that big enough to justify large scale manufacturing.
Not yet.
Not yet, because you have a lot of capacity in other parts of the world also.
So what would it take for companies like you to invest in manufacturing in India?
Well, we continue to evaluate India as a destination because the global solar, the solar segments growing from about 65 to 70 gigawatts per year to about 100 gigawatts by 2022. So the world would need fresh manufacturing at some point in time, but these are extremely capital intensive. And from our standpoint, our biggest manufacturing is in Malaysia, incidentally, and then we have a manufacturing base in the US also. When you look at India, it has the tax rates of a mature economy and accompanied by very high rate of inflation, right? Now, when you look at any other destination, you have either or of these two, right? I mean, either you have a tax-free zone with a high inflation rate, which is what we see in ASEAN countries, or in more mature markets like the US or Europe also, where manufacturing is being planned right now by other companies. While you see a high corporate rate of taxes, the ability to borrow capital is at a very competitive rate.
So that is the challenge.
So one of them has to give for semiconductor manufacturing to come in on scale in India.
I think that's been a challenge for a long time.
Absolutely.
One final point, Sujoy, where do you see the solar as a percentage of all installed capacity of power in India? What percentage can it possibly reach?
Well, so today we have 300 gigawatts of installed capacity connected on the grid. Solar is 8 gigawatts in that. But by 2022, if the plan of doing 100 gigawatts of solar and an additional 75 gigawatts of wind is achieved, then 40% of India's installed generation capacity will be on renewables. And that's a significant amount of capacity, right? In energy terms, that would mean overall about 12 to 15% of renewable energy on the grid at any given point in time, and that's a fairly significant milestone.
Thanks, Sujoy, and that gives you a lot of work to do in the next few years.
Absolutely.
I'm sure you're looking forward to it, but thanks very much for joining us on the show and sharing your plans and your ideas with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranjal. Thanks a lot.